Welcome to The Good Talk. This series is about how companies work, give, and come together, told by the people thinking differently about this work. Each episode will bring in luminaries and visionaries shaping the future of this space. You'll expect some candid stories, practical takeaways, and ideas you can implement straight away in your work. For our very first episode, I feel particularly privileged and excited to be joined by the incredible Aaron Hurst. Aaron is a pioneer in purpose-driven work and social innovation. He has founded the Taproot Foundation, Imperative, and Board.dev. He is the author of The Purpose Economy, and now he is the founder of the U.S. Chamber of Connection. Aaron and I have known each other for years, and I'm always going to follow and get involved with whatever he's cooking up. So I'm excited to have him here today. One of the things that I hear most often from leaders in my conversations is people are feeling disconnected, burned out, an overall sense of uncertainty in the workplace, especially. And Aaron is asking what it really takes to rebuild these social bonds in a time of loneliness and division. I think it's such an important question to be asked and for us to be able to answer collectively. So together, we are going to explore what connection means in this conversation, how it shows up at work and in communities, and why volunteering has a unique role to play in bringing people back together and staying connected. All right, Aaron, I want to start each episode with a quick warm-up. It's a handful of really quick questions, rapid fire, to get to learn a little bit more about you. So how does that sound? Yeah, you're good? Ready?
Bring it on.
Let's do it. All right. So what is one ritual or tradition that matters to you?
Every morning, I try to take 10 minutes for meditation just to clear my head and get centered. I think being present is one of the most important things in life.
I hear that. Breathing and meditating. What is the most adventurous thing that you've ever done in your life?
I've done a lot of world travel. I've done a lot of adventurous things, but the number one thing is probably having kids and being a parent.
That's an adventure every day. What is your favorite travel destination or one that you're dreaming of? You just said you've traveled all over the place.
Uh, I would say I've been doing a lot of work in Chile, and I've just fallen in love with the people in Chile. So right now, what comes to mind is Santiago and Chile.
So beautiful, nestled in that valley with the mountains around it.
Wow.
What is the movie, TV show, or series that you're watching right now, or one that you go back to again and again to rewatch?
I love the show Hacks on HBO. I love it because it's intergenerational comedy and it's just so well written. And just I feel like I can watch it over and over again and just it doesn't get old.
I agree. And Jean Smart is fantastic.
It's amazing.
She's so good.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about a connection that has changed the course of your life or your longest standing connection that you can think of.
I would say my wife. She has been a huge part of both sort of my life, but also my professional life. And being married to someone who's in a similar field and being able to support each other has been, I think, a big part of what's enabled me to be successful and amplify my impact.
I'm sure she'll be happy to hear this when she watches the podcast.
Who knows?
What is a lesson that you have to keep learning and relearning in your career so far?
There's so many things I keep on, I think, relearning. I think the biggest thing for me is slowing down. I have a lot of energy and a lot of ideas, and it's at times easy to get over my skis, and it's important to take a step back. I've implemented a new policy for myself and our team, which is we don't make any decisions day of. We have to always sleep on them, which I think is a good practice.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I like that. So in slowing down, do you have a favorite productivity hack or tool that you use a lot?
hack or tool for productivity. I guess I use a product called Clara Labs, which is an AI assistant. Been using it for about 5 years now, and it has saved me an insane amount of time, stress, and money. It does scheduling as
Clara
it's a
Labs.
person on the other end. It's remarkable.
I think Clara got us here today.
She made
So thank you, Clara Labs.
she
Yeah,
slash they slash it is remarkable.
amazing. And one more. Only one word. You got one word for this answer. No semicolons, no commas. One word that you'd use to describe the future of volunteering or community impact.
Connected.
How apropos.
I bet
All
you're
right.
guessing now he's gonna come. Yep.
Had no idea. Okay, so we did a little bit of warm up. Hopefully, you're feeling like your synapses are firing. Let's rewind a little bit and talk about your journey. You have spent your career as an entrepreneur. You built organizations around purpose in the social sphere, Taproot, Imperative, Board.dev. You've been recognized for your work all over the world, and now you've launched the US Chamber of Connection. So, why did you decide connection was the next big thing that you wanted to take on?
Really, the story around my work begins with my grandfather. He was one of the first naval officers in Hitler's bunk at the end of World War II and was part of rebuilding Germany as part of the Marshall Plan. And what he saw was just the incredible devastation and loss created by global conflict. And it wasn't sort of a big stretch for him to be like, I need to focus my life on how to prevent World War III. And what he saw, especially doing work rebuilding Germany, where you're actually having to work with the people with whom you just fought, you're having to work with the people who just killed your best friend, that the only way to actually bring us together is through shared purpose, through service together, side by side. And about a decade or so later, he was in the Kennedy administration and proposed the idea for an organization that would help Americans go abroad for 2 years to really deeply engage in shared purpose. And that ultimately got refined and launched as the Peace Corps. And that really, for me, has always been the inspiration for my career. Like, how do we bring people across difference together through service, through shared purpose? And everything I've done has been in service, if you will, of that goal, trying to build on the work that he did in his amazing career.
What an amazing grandfather to have, and what an inspiration. Yeah. I know that you're thinking about connection with certain pillars in mind. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what those pillars look like and, why you've broken this down. And I think we'll talk a little bit about connection just as a term in a moment too.
No, those are very connected. I think the reality is, to use the word connected. The reality is that most people don't know what it means to be connected. It's a term we throw around a lot, but people don't know what it means. So we spent a lot of time early on looking at all the research across fields, because there's work on this in urban planning, there's work on this in civic engagement and democracy, there's work on this in health, there's work on this in education. There's all these different fields that are doing work and research around it. But as an individual human being, there's no real clear advice on what do you actually need to have a thriving life from a connection standpoint and to be part of a thriving community. So we identified that there were 6 things that people need from a human-centered point of view that are actionable. The first is you really need to have connection with your neighbors. You need to have a neighbor who's an emergency contact. You need to have the ability to truly know your neighbors. Secondly, you really need to have strong one-on-one relationships. This is the greatest predictor of overall happiness. It's the number one predictor of your well-being and your lifespan is deep one-on-one relationships, which means meeting at least 2 or 3 people for an hour each a week for positive and vulnerable conversation. Absolutely critical. Third is third places. We all need a place outside of home and work where we can go and be among people in the community. It's not necessarily about the deeper relationships, but it's about being in community, being connected to your community, seeing similar faces, being among people who may be a little different from yourself. Then you really need to be part of 2 different kinds of community. One is one around identity, people who share some type of identity with you, which could be based on race or religion, but it could also be based on where you moved from. It could be based on a life experience. It could be that you're both parents. It can be a lot of different things, but something that's a shared experience that accelerates bonding. And then you need to be part of a community of play. Play is one of the most important parts of connection and what accelerates our ability to really bond with people, whether that's sports, arts, there's so many different ways to play. But when you find someone who has a shared passion for doing something together, it helps you connect with people who are different than yourself and to like really accelerate that bond. And last but not least, service, being in service to the community. It is absolutely critical that as we look at how we show up in the world, that we're building relationships that are built around serving others, not just ourselves, and that that's part of what you're building into your overall life. So we do a lot of work with people to help them really redesign their lives around these 6 points of connection.
It's so important to understand how to measure very nebulous terms like this. And I think this is such an amazing way to think about it. When I think about the deep relationship, like just saying it, having a deep relationship, like, and I think what you said there is like, you need to kind of have background. You need to be like weekly having conversation. They need to know you, know your story, know who you are, know your quirks, know your, the good, the bad, the ugly. I think, those are some indicators and ways, for people that have the very, the right brain to understand how to measure this. But I think when you talk about play and identity-based community and finding that third place, I think a lot of people don't have that right now. It feels like, home and work, and that feels like, I think for a lot of people, that's it.
And a
Their
lot of people work from
identity
home.
really.
So they only have one place. So
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And the majority of people don't have, with each of those, majority of people don't have them. So I think that's a lot of the work we need to do is help people know that those are the things. So people should start when they're very young, being taught about this. We should be reinforcing it. We should be helping organizations build it into their structure. We should be building public policy around it. We need to redesign our society around these 6 points.
So great. And I mean, you speak to service too. I mean, we're recording this on September 11th, which is a National Day of Service. A way to recognize that it is an important part of staying connected to the community. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. So I think as we talk about this word connection, we're kind of digging into it and we're hearing a little bit more about, what that means and how you measure it. Across people, cultures, places, and your grandfather obviously recognized it too. Are there ways, like I'm thinking behaviorally, right? So like we're talked about this is some of the indicators, but are there ways of interacting that can help to build towards these different modes of connection and spaces and places of connecting?
Yeah, I think the 6 points really are behaviors people can take that are very concrete to them. I think when you look at it then from a social science perspective, and a lot of the work that's been done around social capital development, there's really 2 sets of terms that are used widely to understand connection. It's less actionable in some ways and more academic, but I think it's useful to talk about. One is the difference between bonding connection and bridging connection. So bonding is generally people who are similar to yourself. So with a family member, you'd have a bonding connection. Probably someone on your team at work, likely to have a bonding connection because there's someone who's like core, they have a lot of similarities to yourself. You're doing a lot of things similar together. It's a bonding connection. And then there's a bridging connection, which is being able to move out of your silos and bridge to another silo. So again, that could be about race, or it could be you're in marketing and they're in tech. It could be that you're a man and they're a woman. It's a lot of different things that can create that, but it's that ability to bridge. And we have an epidemic around loneliness, which is based on the fact that people don't have the bonding connections. And we have an epidemic around loss of trust, which is because we don't have the bridging connections. And they both reinforce each other. Like if we didn't have bonding and just had bridging, we wouldn't have trust because you have to have that foundation of bonding to have the psychological safety to bridge. But those are the sort of 2 different ends or areas that we think about. And then within that, we think about strong versus weak ties. So a strong tie is someone for whom you have frequent interaction. And I would say using sort of grade school language, like you have a full bucket. So there's a lot of trust and you're able to like really operate with that full bucket of trust. And there's weak ties, which is, people who don't know each other as much. They might interact every month or two, or they might have some reason for interaction, like the barista at your Starbucks or someone that every once in a while is in your meetings, a distant cousin. Those are weak ties where there's not as much trust. There's not as much of like sort of a depth of willingness to help the other person. Of course, you can build weak ties into strong ties. But as we look at measurements for the field, you're really looking at our bonding versus bridging, weak versus strong ties, as the way that we think about it. And there's lots of measures of things like levels of loneliness, et cetera. But I think practically those four words are really important to understand.
Yeah, and I mean, I've never thought about it from that point of view, bonding versus bridging and the differences there, and also strong versus weak. Like I think about it like, who are people in my life that I want to be closer to? And how would I get there and how would I build that connection? And I do that intentionally, on a pretty regular basis. I think to myself, like, who are these people that, I really admire, I want to talk to more. I just haven't had the chance. And how do I get there to produce that connection that we're talking about?
That's right.
I want to do kind of a callback. Yeah. Yes.
I was just gonna.
So
I think that's right. I think also those terms are really helpful for people running organizations or in policy, because you start to think about, in my organization, where are the strong ties and weak ties? What are we doing around bonding, which is often around productivity, versus bridging, which is about innovation. So a lot of these things are also very helpful from an institutional standpoint. And a lot of the work I did in the past was about building bonding and bridging capital inside companies and how you can use that to really change the culture of an organization.
And maybe we can stay with that. Like, tell me more about the work that you've done. What does it look like inside a company? What's unique in the workplace context when you think about connection?
By definition, you have some level of shared purpose already because you're working towards a shared goal in a shared cultural context. So it's different in that sense. I think the goals are also just different because you're building towards some kind of outcome. And as we look at what enables organizational performance, a lot of it's about productivity. So how are we helping people be more productive? So that has to do with like trust and acceleration of trust. It's about cohesion as a group and the ability to do that. It's about clarity of goal for those folks, and also having a culture where people aren't quitting all the time, because nothing slows a team down like attrition. It's brutal, and the data is very clear on that. But when it comes to innovation, which is where a lot of organizations struggle, if you just have the same group bonding all the time, they're not likely to actually innovate. So being able to find ways, not just in passing, but to actually mix perspective, mix backgrounds is what really drives towards sustained innovation. So as an organization, if you're really trying to build that kind of culture, it's thinking intentionally about how do you not silo people? How do you create intentional opportunities for people to interact? This is incredibly important. So I've done a lot of that work around building a company that was called Imperative that I started that was doing work to connect people based on different strength of their tie, as well as bonding versus bridging, and then using AI to develop conversations for them to have virtually that would help create that connection. So it's really looking at like, how do you on a large scale start to influence culture through intentional relationship development? It's just one aspect of that. There's a lot more that has to go into that, but managing this work, and there's a whole field called organizational network analysis, which is really around measuring organizations through the lens of connection. And it's ridiculously predictive of so many things.
I want to learn more about that. I mean, you're talking about kind of in the ideal corporate context, when we can be building these connections kind of easily. I think I was going to call back to your book, The Purpose Economy, where I remember you cited, some data that's disconcerting, and I don't think it's very different today. I think it was Gallup data that said 69 to 71% of the workforce is disengaged. So like what you're talking about, building connection at work, I think is kind of in the ideal scenario. Let's fast forward to today. You wrote the book, what was it, 10, 11 years ago now? It's been a minute.
Something like that.
Uh-huh. So we've got hybrid work, we've got the pandemic, we've got AI onslaught, we've got, this loneliness epidemic that you're talking about. I think disengagement is still pretty like a pressing challenge in the workplace, and for people in community too. So tell me more about you know, how the Chamber of Connection is attempting to change that narrative. And is the problem different today? Is it the same? Is it just a different flavor of the similar disengagement? Say more
The
there.
original,
Yeah.
yeah. So we did the first study ever about purpose in the workplace with NYU about 10 years ago and found that 2/3 of the workforce is unfulfilled. So only about 1 in 3 people is fulfilled at work, and it's ridiculously predictive of performance, retention, whether or not someone's a brand ambassador, like massive problem. So I share that. I think that's in many ways gotten worse. People's work remotely, the stress of the current workplace, the stress of what's going on in the world. If we measured that today, I would guess even more people are unfulfilled at work. And one of the main reasons for that, Alissa, is that there's 3 things that create fulfillment, not just at work, but in life. Relationships. We need meaningful relationships. We need to make an impact, and we need to grow. We coined the term rig for this. You need to rig your life. Relationships, impact, and growth. Almost nothing else matters. Like those are the things that matter. And we focus a lot in the workplace on impact and on growth. Often not enough on growth, but relationships is really the foundation for all of that. And relationships continue to deteriorate in the workplace. Remote work is creating a lot of that. I think a lot of the fear and the churn in employees is creating that. AI is threatening a lot of people in that direction. And just we also, I think, within the tech industry and more broadly, there's been a lot of layoffs for the sake of profitability. And with that, when you have mass layoffs and changes, it creates a tremendous amount of fear among employees, which degrades relationships. And it also, when someone's laid off, we're like, oh, you have one less FTE. You're like, yeah, and that was my best friend, damn it. Like, it's not just a like FTE, it's a human being. And we're like constantly
Absolutely.
severing relationships. And we're not really taking into account the actual impact that has on fulfillment. We're just like, that's great. We're going to find you a temp to replace that. Like, don't worry, move on. It's like, yeah, that's not really the trauma I just experienced. You're not addressing that. So we've got some pretty fundamental broken parts of our current, I think, workplace around this issue of connection.
So with that in mind, and I agree, I mean, full-heartedly to everything you just shared, how can we in the workplace, in our communities, design experience for connection, like as that being the reason, rather than it being something that just happens by chance, right? Like the donut party in the kitchen at the workplace, that
Yep.
everybody meets and has a donut, or let's all go to the escape room for a team bonding experience, like those don't necessarily scream connection to me. Like, how do we design for it to be a place to do those sort of things?
I mean, I love the word design. And I think if I were thinking about this most broadly and strategically, what I really look at is designing an employee value proposition and the employee life cycle. So everything from like that first job description, I'm an advocate for writing job descriptions where it talks about the relationships you're going to be able to build, and it reinforces that relationships are of value. It goes to your onboarding. Actually, even before onboarding, the hiring process and like how relationships are described, whether or not you're having human interaction with people you're interviewing, that makes a huge imprint. How people onboard has a big imprint on whether or not you're actually giving them time to get to know people and to build connection, or if you're just really quickly moving to task, in which case you're really sending a message that doesn't matter. It goes to how in their onboarding are defining the jobs and tasks that are about relationships and saying that those are important, and also helping them map out, given your career, Alissa, at Acme Corp, these are the key relationships that we recommend that you really invest in developing. And here is what the research shows it takes to have relationships. So we're equipping you to know relationships are important, doing the personal reflection on the kind of relationships you want, and tying it to your success so that you're able to drive that and you're able to check in with your manager on that issue around connection. And then it's tying it into, as much as possible, every interaction of building a culture of checking in at a human level first before task. Whether that's in a team meeting by having like an upfront question people check in on that's not just what did you do this weekend, but something deeper. Whether that's just in a one-on-one interaction, being able to do that. So that's very successful and effective. You need in real life, in-person engagement with folks. It's just fundamentally different. So being able to create enough space, but with intentionality behind it. So it's not just, hey, we're all in person, but there's purpose behind it. There's structure. People want structured, purposeful interaction. They're not looking for unstructured time. And I think a lot of times the donuts or the happy hour, they're unstructured social time, which really only works for extroverts. And it tends to still be very superficial conversation. Then you sort of have things like a employee all hands. Guess what happens on all hands? No one talks. It's people up on stage yapping at people. It's not what people actually want.
Talking heads. A lot of stage, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And if you look at the surveys afterwards for people's feedback, what they talk about is the times they got to talk to each other is always the highest rated part of those events. So design interaction first. And then we'll talk more about it later, but service and how we actually think about the idea of service inside an organization is another major lever in that way.
I want to talk about that now. I think that is very interesting to me. Obviously, you can understand why. So when we think about service, why do you think service and being in service to the community and volunteering are so powerful in building connection?
A lot of different reasons. I think starts with it creates a shared purpose that's about something bigger than your company and bigger than yourself. And it tends to force reflection. And when you're reflecting together with other people, that's accelerating that sense of bonding and that sense of understanding and empathy. It's also an opportunity to do things outside your comfort zone. So there's like a deep vulnerability to that that helps also accelerate that sense of connection within a team. Those two are like incredibly important parts of it. I think the other piece is that the act of giving, just there's few things that make you feel better. So it puts you into a very positive emotional state, which then removes a lot of the fear, removes a lot of the scarcity mindset and puts you into an abundance mindset. And when you're in an abundance mindset, it's much easier to connect with other people because you don't see them as a competitor, but you see the abundance and the ability to shape things together. So very powerful from that perspective. I think the challenge right now with volunteering is that just like work, it's become more and more transactional and more virtual and much more episodic. And what we've done is we've removed the human element of it to as much as possible to get efficiency, and it's starting to backfire some. I think with service, we have to look at how are we doing that with service as well, and how do we start to build that human connection into it. And my undergraduate work was in service learning, which is one of my main passions, is like how do we learn through service, which is a big part of why companies are investing and should invest in service. But we don't actually optimize, for example, service for learning in most cases. We don't do the pre-context setting. We don't do the reflection beforehand. We don't do the reflection afterwards. Those are the things that actually cause the meaning and the learning to be created. The experience without reflection actually doesn't add much value to the person. It's only through that act of reflection and ideally shared reflection that value gets retained and is something that actually sort of lives up to the billing. I think similarly, relationship-wise, unless we're finding ways for people to really connect as people, not just be side by side during service opportunities, if they're not finding a way to bond pre and post, if they're not having sort of social interaction during it, it's not optimizing for social connection. We can talk more about it, but that's sort of, I think, one of the main things we really need to address.
Yeah, I know you're right. And when you talk about volunteering turning into more of a transactional thing, I think the service learning structure you talk about is really powerful there. I think it's a good way for folks to look at exactly what you just described. How do you design an experience for volunteering that contains all of these pieces that you talked about, reflection, about, connection within, being vulnerable, and, sharing that vulnerability creates trust amongst people on a team and across teams, I think. So is there anything unique that you think as we're building for, these volunteer experiences in the future that you would draw out for designing within the workplace?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm thinking yeah.
Could go on for that. Go on for that for a while. The things that really come to me is like really around like how are we designing the entry and exit to volunteering is one of the biggest places that we can really make an impact. I think being more transparent up front about what are the connection opportunities within different types of opportunities so that we're bringing that forward in the conversation about what types of service we're selecting. Really thinking about what is not just the connection between the people volunteering, but also between them and the recipients and maybe the nonprofit or whoever's organizing that. It's not just about connection on the team. And then there's some broader pieces. Like, one of the big things that I think really has to change is we have to stop thinking about connection as just a byproduct of service, but actually connection itself as a cause. You should be able to say, I'm looking for a connection-based service, not I'm looking to do service in the arts and I want connection to happen. It's more like, no, like I want to help contribute to addressing the biggest problem in our country, which is the decline in connection and trust, and really think differently about the types of volunteering that opens up. If someone wants to create a running club at your company, that is a form of service that is helping to build connection if you think of connection as a cause. So starting to really think about how do we reframe volunteering much more broadly around connection by putting connection at the forefront as a cause itself.
I think just that statement alone, when you gather, I think that's really powerful. Like as a company, we want to address this issue that we have recognized it with connection in the workplace and outside the workplace. And here's how we're doing it. Like that's huge. No one ever says that. No one ever talks about that.
Yeah. No, it's not treated as a cause. And it's part of why there's no resources behind it. Volunteering is not about it because we don't optimize around it because we're not labeling it as such. We're saying it's hopefully something that happens as a byproduct of what we're doing, instead of saying like a end of itself is an end. And we know almost all of our happiness is based on relationships, like over 70%. So like, why aren't we making that a cause when most people don't have it? It's as if we have like a massive issue with hunger and we're not doing anything to feed people. Like that's what we have on connections. So we really need to, and a lot of the work I'm trying to do now is really lobbying, in philanthropy and volunteering, et cetera, to start moving connection up. So when you're looking at it, it's like arts, environment, connection. Like it needs to be up there as you're starting to look for opportunities and labeling them so that we start thinking about this differently.
Yeah. And it brings to mind the show, The Blue Zones, that, people are 100 plus years old. And one of the main components in all of those places is they have points of connection within their community and amongst people around them. So, I mean, it totally makes sense. And it's what we're thinking about at Good Era all the time. And I think it's why our worlds fit together so nicely and organically and wonderfully. And I think, we are thinking about this together and kind of hacking on this together. And that's why we're partnering and launching what we're calling Volunteering Reconnected with you. I want to get into that a little bit. I do want to do a little bit of future tripping first, though, with you. Can we do that?
Let's go there.
I like future tripping. So we've talked about, volunteering service as a gateway and a way for connection and being a movement around this. Where do you think this volunteering connection movement will take us in the next 5 to 10 years? Like, what do you see in your vision in the next, in the future?
I think there's different ways of looking at that, but I see fundamentally is that service can be the thing that really sparks this, because what we found in the work we've done so far at the Chamber of Connection is that people are really reluctant to work on connection in their life because it feels self-serving and it's very vulnerable to say you need to work on it. But if you say to someone, do you want to work on helping others with connection? Hand goes up right away. Not because they want to help with it, which they do, but it's a safe place to work on connection for themselves. We've had as many people sign up to volunteer as to actually be recipients of that support. So if we can start to change the frame and start to make this work around connection something that people think of as service, we can actually get a lot more people actively working on the thing that they know that they're struggling with. So what I'm imagining is just millions of people working towards helping others with connection, and by extension, working on it for themselves and starting to really bridge communities so we can start as a nation to come back together again, because we all know that we have this shared need for connection. We're helping each other with the 6 points of connection. Like we can truly make a significant difference there. I think the second piece is we'll see at a corporate level, at a public policy level, connection elevated to the same as like health. And that we're putting resources behind it, we're putting infrastructure behind it, and we're like really treating it as what it should be, which is one of the greatest predictors of our longevity and of our happiness, if not the predictor of that. And that's part of like the dashboard for a company and a dashboard for society and a dashboard for how we think about, education and our educational system. And we'll also see a fundamental shift in how we think about service, where things like doing a block party, which is one of the best forms of service you can do in your life, is thought of as service. Right now in our culture, we think anything that could be self-serving in any way is not service. And that's a big
Mm.
part where parts of service have fallen apart. There's no reason why you can't be a beneficiary of the service that you're doing. And in most cases, the person volunteering actually is getting more out of it than the other person anyway. So it's being more honest in some ways about the value exchange there. But I would love to see companies every year supporting millions of block parties across the country that their employees are doing, and potlucks, and running clubs, and cold plunge clubs, and craft clubs. Like, let's build the infrastructure for that kind of volume of activity and dramatically change how we think about like what falls under service. And that's part of why I'm so excited to be working on with Gadara, because what you've done has made that possible. So I started the Taproot Foundation 25 years ago. We dramatically changed the nature of corporate service. Gadara has done that again by showing what's possible with scale. And now we're ready for that third, I think, act. And the third act is taking the kind of scale that Gadara has created, and then let's like dramatically change how we're defining service and just blow this whole thing up at a scale that I think most people had never even thought was possible before, because we're making connection at the core of it.
Okay, that was like the best soundbite we could have asked for right there. But I think that was so beautifully said. I just think if it's fundamentally shifting how we think about connection and how we think about how we connect. I do like the kind of the reverse psychology around it. Like, do you want to help other people connect? And you just know intrinsically that's something that, you need to do inside. Kind of the behavioral side of this too. I think all of those pieces coming together, like you said, are what is going to make this conversation so exciting with Volunteering Reconnected. I think, why did we land on this name, Volunteering Reconnected? Can you share what that means in your mind?
Yeah, I think volunteering in its earliest form is probably like at a village level, hundreds of years ago, where we were helping our neighbors. And it was like a primary
Mhm.
way of connection in our sort of society when we were at a very small scale. We probably didn't call it volunteering. It was just how you show up as a good neighbor. And as we've gotten bigger and scaled up as a society, we've become more and more abstracted. And we need to go back to like really thinking about service as something that's sort of core to our culture, core to who we are, and that connection is what bonds it and what makes it powerful. So
Mhm.
that's sort of a key part of why we called it that. I think the second one is I was part of a major initiative that we got started called Volunteering Reimagined about 10 to 15 years ago that like really worked on some significant changes to volunteering. For example, I worked on a study that found that nonprofits that use a lot of volunteers outperform those who don't use volunteers. So there was this really interesting assumption people had that like only organizations that are ineffective use volunteers so they can't afford to hire staff. And we actually
Sure.
created a term called the service enterprise and said, no, as a funder, do not fund an organization that's not using a lot of volunteers, because it just means they fundamentally don't know how to be resourceful. They don't know how to engage the community. They don't know how to build relationships. Only fund service enterprises. And we looked at like, how can we redefine a reimagined service as actually the definition of success for an organization, not a sign of weakness. And I think similarly
Mhm.
here, looking at a campaign around how do we reconnect service? How do we define service in a way in which it actually brings the country together, because there's a tremendous amount of energy around connection right now. And we can use that to really lift volunteering, because I think volunteering right now has started to um, erode in a lot of places, but connection can bring it back up and then accelerate it like crazy.
And I mean, we haven't explicitly said it, but like as we come out of the kind of contracting that we felt during the pandemic, I feel like everyone is now coming out and saying, my preference right now is to be in person. Like I do not
Yeah.
want to have another virtual conversation if I can, help that it,
Yeah.
won't happen again. So I think, like you said, we're certainly in a moment in time that people are hungry for this, that the preference is absolutely to connect in person and think about how we can go deeply with this. I think
It's a,
yeah, it's a moment in time.
it's a yes and to that. So totally agree.
Yeah.
And our skills as a society at interacting in person have degraded. So part of what
Oh,
we've got to do is also
absolutely.
keep this skill
Yeah.
development, because some people actually don't want to meet in person because they have anxiety about it now. So how do we start to build the skills how do we actually help people have meaningful interaction? How do we help them feel comfortable being vulnerable? We need to be able to really develop that from kids all the way through. And it's a lot of the work that we can do in our partnership, working with companies, is like, how do we help build those skills? Because they're not only necessary from a well-being standpoint, but as we look at the rise of AI, people's ability to be human and to have relationships and to connect is a big part of what's going to enable them to be successful. It's less and less about knowledge, and it's more and more about relational skills.
Yeah. Kind of the connective skills is what I'll call them. I don't want like soft skills doesn't feel right. I think it's like how do we build these connections like we've been talking about?
Yeah, Kelly
Um,
Palmer, who I love, she talks about his power skills, which I like. It's like
Power.
reaffirming it.
Ooh. Okay, so for people that are planning or that we will invite here to join us at Volunteering Reconnected on October 15th, what can they expect? What will they be surprised and delighted by when we bring folks together to talk about reconnecting around volunteering?
So we're kicking this all off October 15th in Silicon Valley. It's going to be freaking amazing. It is not a conference. We are building a day of design. You're going to be working on your own personal life and how you think about connection in your own life, because you need that as a starting place to be able to do this work. You can't just go into this academically. We need to do some of that personal work to think about how is connection showing up for us, what works, what's not working for us. So you're going to be doing a lot of work to actually strengthen and build new friendships. You're going to be doing work to think about connection in your own life and have a plan for how you want to start to work towards that. You're going to be able to really get a briefing on the current state of connection and service and really understand this field and why this is the number one problem in the country, but also the number one opportunity for us to all go forward and invest in this. And then we're going to break into design studios. You're going to have 2 hours with 14 new best friends to actually take a challenge and fully design a solution. So for example, we've got one design studios around how do we build volunteering to optimize for bridging connections, meeting people who are different from yourself. So we're going to go through and actually design what an ideal volunteer opportunity is and what are the changes we can make to build bridging relationships. So an example of one of the studios. Then we're going to all come back together and like really look at all these solutions and imagine what, to your question earlier, what might this look like in 3 years when we've completely transformed the field of service around the insights that are coming out of this day? America was built by the founding fathers. Like this is going to be the founding fathers and mothers and aunts and uncles of this new service movement. And the people in the room are really going to be the ones designing the constitution of this new form and thinking of service. And we're going to end the day really making a commitment to ourselves about what are the changes I want to make to model this. What are the changes I want to make in my institution? And how do I, as a citizen, want to be part of building this and moving this forward? And this is really just the kickoff. We're planning to do this now as an annual event. So you're going to be part of a growing community of people who are working together to conspire to reconnect America, which I can't think of a better use of a day.
I mean, after that, I feel like everyone listening wants to join us. Like this just you wouldn't want to pass up the opportunity to be the founding person of something like a movement like this. I think
Founding
it's going to
person, you
be
get snacks. So I mean, like, what else do you want?
and there's food. What's better? And you'll be in California where hopefully it's a little bit sunny.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we can hope for a little sun. So I'm so excited, by the way, for this event. I can't wait. I think it's going to be the beginning of something really incredible. And like you said, it's only the beginning. It's a start, sparking the conversation, designing some of these things. And I think, we want to take this to other places and spaces over the next year and years to build this together. So thank you for being with us on that journey.
No,
Yeah.
we're doing it together. And I think I'm really excited to be, hosting this and to be partnering with Gadara on it. And I'm really excited that we're going to have like the best in corporate service and philanthropy there. We're going to have HR leaders who are really thinking about this in terms of broader connection within the organization. We're going to have leaders nationally in the fields of social connection and in service. So bringing in like real experts around this from the industry. So this is really going to be a cross-functional bridging event of the best people across all these areas coming into one room to really figure out how to make this happen. And we've got some great partners in the University of California, Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center is going to be there and helping bring a lot of their expertise. The Foundation for Social Connection, which is really coordinating a lot of the research on connection, is going to be there. Idealist and Volunteer Match, which is the largest database of volunteer opportunities in the world, is going to be there with their CEO. Big Think is going to be there. Nation Swallow is going to be there. We're going to have like so many amazing organizations that are going to help amplify everything that comes out of the room. This is not going to just be going in one place. This is going to sort of explode like a volcano all over the field because we've got the people in there that can propel it forward. It's going to be incredible.
I think you've done a great job talking about and making us real excited for this day. I think we've covered a lot during our time together. We've said connection a lot, I think. I think what I'd like to end us on is there one thing that you can offer up in terms of, when people leave and, when they've watched this from beginning to end, because we all know that that's what everyone does with podcasts these days. What is one small shift that you can make when you think about connection? What would that, like one thing that you would offer to take away?
Great question. I would just recommend just think about one thing today that you're going to do to like reach out and connect with somebody. And if you just do that, it could be a small thing, but just every day, just do one thing that'll start to like quickly create a flywheel of connection. So just think of one thing today that you can do. Reach out to someone that, you haven't been in touch with, or reach out and express gratitude to someone who is really important to you. Tomorrow, ask yourself again, what's one small thing I can do to increase connection? It could be in the next meeting I have, I'm going to actually check in and care about how people are doing. It could be about, I'm going to reach out to someone I don't know, but just try to find one small thing every day to help increase connection in your life. And the wonderful thing, Alissa, about connection, anything you do to work on connection is service, because unlike almost anything else, you cannot do connection alone. So everyone's struggling with connection. When you work on it, you're de facto helping other people. So there's no greater way to help yourself and help others than to invest in connection.
I think we just did it, you and me, today.
Amen. For sure. It's been great conversation. And I think the work you've done throughout your career and the work we're going to be doing together, I'm so excited to go from a weak tie to a strong tie.
Yeah, we're on our way. I like it. Well, thank you, Aaron, for your time. This was such a joy to get to hear more about your work, your background, your energy around connection. It's just as much as Godera and what we're trying to do. So, like I said, I think this is a beautiful organic partnership that we'll have. And we hope to see everybody listening on October 15th. The way that you can join us there is request an invite at godera.com/events/volunteering-reconnected. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize that. We'll drop the link in the show notes so you have it. And thank you again for being with us, Aaron. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back soon to do good together.
Excited to see everybody on October 15th.